I'm going to start my presentation with a simple question. Am I a black artist? What does that mean? Who defines it? And do I have a choice? I mean, this has been a question I've asked throughout my career making art. So I'm going to weave through different exhibitions I've done, and the early ones where there are black art exhibitions, and later ones where they're not. And so the first show I'm going to talk about was a show created by Eddie Chambers in 1991. It is an exhibition called 4x4, and they had 16 artists in 4 galleries. So in some ways, it was like a survey show of what some black artists were doing at that time. When I made this work, it's called Glass Houses, I was living in Glasgow, where I was doing an MA in Fine Art. And also Glasgow was interesting for me because that's where my family moved to when they came to the UK. They lived in Glasgow first, before moving further south. And so I was thinking about the memories they brought with them. Mainly my family, the Sikh community that exists in Glasgow. And so I made these 6 tall houses in the shape of houses found in the Punjab, in the north of India, where my family comes from, which are single-story buildings, and often there's stairs on the outside. And inside these houses, I'd made a series of clay objects. All the clay objects are of Indian items found in, but some of them you wouldn't recognize, some of them you wouldn't know what they are. But because I put them in these glass houses, people assumed they were a historical item, not everyday items that are used all the time. And also another level was the glass houses, so who would want to live in glass houses? But I chose glass houses because they're for like something that's there, not there. It's like a memory, something you bring. So in this way, this work was quite apt to be in the show, this black art show, because my work here was about cultural identity and about my family. And the next work I'm going to talk about, I was going to talk a bit about what it meant being in a black art show, but I think that will be discussed later on, the whole conference. Because on one level, it was really, hugely beneficial, because I was invited to make this work, there was a good budget, I was paid a fee, and I could make a large work, which I loved doing. And it gave my work visibility. So on that level, it was really, really good. But on another level, it's problematic. And the main way is that if you're invited to do a black art show, then you're invited to another, and before you know it, all you do is make work about cultural identity, and you're pigeonholed. So I was very aware of that. So it's beneficial, but it's also, there's 2 sides to it. And the next 3 works I'm going to talk about were works that appeared in another a big survey show called the British Art Show, which is a show that happens every 5 years, and it shows the most interesting work going on in the UK at that time. And I was in British Art Show 4 in 1995, and I was shown amongst, Damien Hirst, Chris Feely, Wilson Twins. It was, I was in really, really good company. So first I'm going to talk a bit about the work, and then I'll talk about the context. Well, the work I made for this show, I'm going to show you 3 of the pieces I made. There were 5 altogether. And when I made these works, I was living in Barcelona. And when I was there, of course, it had a huge influence in the work I was making. Because suddenly I could make work about whatever I wanted to do. I have felt this huge freedom. And also, I realised how very English or British my work was. It's how it had importance on words. And so while I was there, I tried to focus more on the visual, which became quite important. And also, I was fascinated how the Spanish had a completely different way of working. It was fascinating. Not that, to be immersed in that situation. And so this work is called Innocence. It was made in 1993. And when I first showed this in Barcelona, it was seen as a work about vulnerability. Why would you have a small child's garment wearing a knife? And for me, that's the most important meaning of this work, is, about vulnerability. That's why I called it Innocence. And then when I showed And I wasn't expecting them to read it as a Sikh garment, because this is a very, very Sikh garment. Because the colour orange represents those who want Khalistan. They want to separate from the rest of India and have their own Sikh state or Sikh country. And the sword it's carrying is one of the 5 Ks that Sikhs carry. But I don't expect everyone to know that. So I'm happy for people to read the work on one level, but not necessarily get all of it. And also because in Barcelona there wasn't a huge Sikh community, and definitely not a gallery-going Sikh community. So when I made the work, it wasn't about it being a Sikh dress. And this work, next work, also made in '93, is called Cot. And it's like a grotesque cot, where it's sort of like growing out and expanding at the top. And it's white, so I'm trying to make the metal a bit hot, not so harsh. It's quite innocent. The whiteness makes it the innocence of a cot. And in between the layers are all the mattresses. There's 8 mattresses. And in between the layers I have garments stuffed in between. There they are. In between the mattresses. So it becomes like the story of the princess and the pea. Like whoever sleeps in this cot, it's like the memories, I suppose, the glass houses. Will they be aware of the memories that have gone on before? And this is a photograph of the corner of my studio. And this one's called Sleeping Figures. And it's quite throwaway. This was made in '94. It's quite throwaway. There are 4 blobs under a blanket. One's dark blue. I mean, this photo does look light, but it's dark blue, and 3 yellow ones. And they just tucked under a blanket, just sleeping. And when I showed this work, that's a shot of it in the gallery, I was quite amazed at people's reaction to the work, because I thought it was quite throwaway, no one would take it seriously. I mean, this was made in '94, but people felt quite sorry for the blobs. Like, I've left them to sleep in the corner, shouldn't I look after them a bit better? But I said, but they're just blobs, they have no features, they have no arms, they're just, 2 circles, 2 forms. So, even though it was quite throwaway, I think that made it quite strong, that the emotions that it can bring out in people of wanting to protect them, and then thinking, why do you want to protect them? Because they're not fully toys either, they're just blobs. And another important aspect is when I showed this work in the British Art Show, was when in the catalogue essay about the work, which was written by Richard Cork, he talked first primarily about the work. And then towards the end, he mentioned Perminder Kaur is a British Asian artist or British Indian artist. So I think that's very important, because the most important thing for him was the work and not my identity. Because often if the first sentence has that words in it, then people expect your work to be about something, about identity. So it was good that he didn't put that in the first sentence, because then it meant that's not the most important aspect of the work. There's lots of other things going on in the work. This work's called Tall Beds, and this was a solo show. So I'm weaving back and forwards between Black Art, then British Art Show. Well, this is a solo show at the Icon Gallery in '96. And these beds are about 3.5 meters high. And it could be said it's about home, belonging, but for me, it's about more than that. It's more about insecurity and vulnerability in some ways, like where do you feel safe sleeping, but not because of my identity, just generally where do you feel safe sleeping? Because in some level it's quite comforting to sit on the top of the bed, you're in your own space, separated away from the world, it feels quite nice to be remote, away from everything. But would you feel safe to sleep in there? The whole show was about falling, because you can see the figures at the back, all these falling figures. Detail of those. There they are. There's one of them. So these figures are like curled up, wrapped up in a ball, and they're just falling down the wall. And the way this show was promoted was the works about the uncanny, the unheimlich, about an unusual dystopian, not dystopian, but a weird bedroom, basically. You have all these figures curled up, falling down the wall, and the tall beds which you could fall out of. And then there was another work where there was a curtain in a frame, and then the pattern had fallen to the floor. Everything was just falling. And even though they could have related this work to be about belonging and cultural identity, it wasn't. It was promoted, about other things. So this was a work in a show called Krishna, the Divine Lover. Would I consider this an Indian art show or Asian art show? I'm not sure. But I was chosen because I was Indian. And it was a Hayward touring, and this is at the Whitechapel Gallery, the back wall at the very back. And it consisted of some contemporary artists, and there's these amazing, beautiful miniature paintings of Krishna. And I decided, because he's a god of love, I thought I'd do a work about relationships. There they are. So I used the two figures. And so in some of them, the figures are quite happy, like you've seen the one in the middle, the most important, they're sort of like dancing, while others are a bit more upset. And there were 52, so there was like one for every week of the year. And it's basically about relationships, what people do to each other. But here they are just two different coloured fabrics, so you don't know which is a male, which is female, or there could be two males, two females. And they're quite generic again, just very simple forms of figures, and they're held together by snap fasteners, which you can't really see here. So I always like the idea that the figures could change position. They're not stuck in those positions. And because I was in this show called Krishna, the Divine Lover, I thought maybe my work should be a bit more Indian. Maybe I should use Indian fabric. But then I thought that would close the work right down. And it was better to just, to make them more, so in ways that other people could read it. Because if it's Indian fabric, they might think, it's not about me, it's about, for that sort of person. And now I'm going to leap almost 20 years from that work to a show I did recently at the University of Hertfordshire. It was a solo show called Interlopers. And the show was full of these black teddy bears taking over the gallery space, climbing, escaping, running, hiding. Well, not running, but doing lots of different things. And this was the first one I made. And he's dark grey, he's not black, he's a dark grey teddy. And he was sitting high up on the wall in this branch made out of copper, just watching what's going on, quite passive. But you're not sure if he's a threat or not because of his colour of his fabrics, his dark grey. And he's got his leg climbing down, so you don't know if he wants to come in into the space or he's just waiting and watching. And I haven't really talked about the relationship of modernism to my work, because often in my work I use two materials. Like in the first one, the glass houses, the glass and the ceramics. And my favourite of all is copper and fabric, like combining the hardness of the steel, of the copper, and the softness of the fabric, that there's this tension that's created. And I've used rubber and copper. Yeah, so just two contrasting materials, and it's about the relationship between those two materials. And then I decided, okay, I've made a dark grey teddy. Maybe I should just go and make a black one. And I knew that if I made a black teddy, that people would think the work was about race, because it's black, and I made it. While I chose to do black because I thought I wanted the teddies to be like a shadow, to camouflage, to be hidden in the curtain. So these teddies are made out of the same fabric as the curtain behind. And here I've used this woolen fabric that sort of sucks in the light rather than reflecting it. And these teddies, you're not sure if, like in camouflage, are they hiding? Not wanting to be seen? Or are they waiting before they pounce? So you don't know if they're a threat or not. For me, they're hiding. They're just waiting there. And they've become the new pattern on the curtain. And again, I knew if I put teddies in a cart, that people will think it's about refugees. It's not. They're black teddy bears. They're quite well made. They're fully stuffed, and they're not squashing. I was very particular that they didn't get squashed in there. They have quite a bit of space around them. And they're in a copper cart, a cart made out of copper. And so if it was made out of steel, then it would be a bit darker, I think. But when you use copper, the copper always seems to, for me, represents the other, the exotic. And so it's like a child's game again, where a child's just taking their toys. I don't know, just playing. And this, again in the show there was these ones. These are called shadow play. And these were, I don't have the full one actually. It was they were on chains that were 5 meter high, and there were a series of 12 teddies, 12 chains, climbing the chains. And you weren't sure when you saw in the galleries, were the teddies trying to climb, to escape, to get away, or were they going to climb down into the space, which people would find more threatening? And I'm thinking, but they're teddies, how can teddies be threatening? And, you know, it was amazing me how people can project and see things on the work, and what their story is and what they're doing. And the chains are made out of copper, so they're quite delicate. They're like jewellery. So the chains aren't that strong. They just about support the teddies climbing up. And another thing that amazed me in this show was these teddies, also they're different sizes, because when I make them, these ones are the largest ones, so they're about 1 metre high. And in the gallery, they had this huge window space, 8 metres high by 11 metres wide. And I thought it'd be really apt to put a work in the window. And here there are 10 of them, 10 teddies, just sitting in the window in this in-between space, just watching what's going on. And again, people felt protective about that. What about this one higher? What if he falls down? What happens to him? How can you do that? I mean, people came to me like, how can you do this to teddies? One stuck in a cut, you know. We will take them home. We will look after them. But I was also amazed that people wanted to take these teddies home with them, because especially the big ones. I mean, I found the big ones quite more disturbing, especially in the studio. I had to put them, because I kept thinking there's a person in there, in this space. So I wouldn't know why anyone would want to take them home, because they have no features. They have no eyes, nose, mouth. They're just a basic form. I mean, they are soft because they're made out of woolen fabric. So you don't know if, you know, yeah, but that's something that amazed me. I thought that people would find them a bit more disturbing, but no, they're teddies, they wanted to take them home, which is good. I thought that's really, really positive, which has led me on to thinking I would like to do a work about that somehow, about the teddies going in people's homes. And the last work I'm going to talk to you today about is this work called Grey Skirt, which was also in the show, and sort of highlight how I think my work has modernist tendencies, because I'm very interested in the materials I use. I tend to stick to the same materials at the moment. I like metal and fabric quite a lot. And technique is important to me, how things are made. Like welding and sewing are two techniques I like doing. And formal, the work's very formal. Like I work out exactly how high I want the table, how I want the legs splayed out. If they're splayed out too much, then the table looks too like it's going to fall over. If it's not enough, it looks too stable. And the use of the fabric, the grey fabric. So here, for me, the table is learning to walk. It's not quite stable, and this is further emphasised when I've used the grey material, the grey fabric. So it's like a skirt. So the table has some human elements to it by wearing the skirt. And it's also important when I'm working out how long I want the skirt to be, because too long, it looks frumpy. And here I think it's just about right, so it's vulnerable. You know, the skirt's vulnerable. And then you think about the points. For me, it was like the table's on tiptoes. It hasn't quite learned how to walk, and it can't fully stand on the floor, while others might see that as more threatening, you know, the points. For me, it was about the stability of the table, not that the table is dangerous. And I'm ending on this work because it's grey. Because my original question at the beginning was, am I a black artist? And for me, there is a grey area, which is, you know, I know it's a bit corny, but, you know, there is a greyness. I'm not saying I'm a grey artist, but there is a grey area. And that's the end of my talk.